Saubona, bonjour, marhaban, hola, namaste, ni hao, habari, salutan, shalom, and the warmest aloha from my heart to yours. I'm Tadia Rice, and I'm so happy to be with you to bring you another edition of Womanocity for Women with Curiosity. I'm located in the middle of the Pacific Ocean in the Hawaiian Islands, the most distant landmass from anywhere else in the world, broadcasting globally on Woman Radio, for women, by women, reaching out around the globe to unite women. Today we have a remarkable guest, but before that, I'd like to talk to you about a very interesting subject that's close to my heart, and that is women attorneys, women advocates, women lawyers. Many people realize that one of the most impressive aspects of the legal profession is its ability to open doors and shatter glass ceilings in a variety of professional capacities. Female attorneys in prominence and power in law, government, and politics have been well known. We recently lost Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who was the second female ever to serve on the U.S. Supreme Court. Her legal career was remarkable. She broke concrete ceilings at Harvard, Columbia, and Rutgers School of Law. Outside of the classroom, Ruth Bader Ginsburg spent a lot of her career advocating for gender equality and women's rights. She won so many victories before the Supreme Court. She volunteered as a lawyer for the American Civil Liberties Union in the 70s, and she was appointed to America's Supreme Court by President Bill Clinton in 1993. Interestingly, Hillary Rodham Clinton also was a major American lawyer before she was ever the First Lady in the Oval Office. And she wasn't the first one. The second First Lady, Michelle Obama, was also an influential public figure who graduated from Harvard Law School in 1988. Of course, she emerged as one of the most influential figures in world history and American society. Women lawyers who became leaders should be celebrated, especially the first generations of women in law. I bet you didn't know, though, that the very first woman who became a lawyer was in Serbia in 1847. She did exclusive pro bono work for charity throughout her entire career. In 1869, the first woman, Arabella Mansfield, became the first lawyer in the United States when she was admitted to the Iowa State Bar. It was in 1873 Johanna von Erinov became the first woman in Germany admitted as a law student at Leipzig University. It wasn't long after that in 1897, Clara Brett Martin became the first female lawyer in Canada and the British Empire. The same year, Ethel Benjamin became the first female lawyer in New Zealand. It was in 1905 that Flos Gregg became the first female barrister in Australia. A few years later, in 1911, Clotilde Luisi became the first female lawyer in Uruguay. It was in 1912, in South Africa, that the Cape Law Society refused to register Madeline Wookey. Although she had been an articled clerk, they refused to register her. In 1913, Natividad Almeida Lopez became the first female lawyer in the Philippines. In 1918, in Sweden, Eva Unden became the first female lawyer, and it would be in Romania in 1920 that Ella Negruzi became their first female lawyer. In 1922, Helena Normanton was the first female barrister to practice in England. It was in 1923 that Irene Antoinette Geffen became the first female lawyer in South Africa, and she was admitted to the bar in Transvaal. So you see, women all over the world have paved the way for others to enter into the law practice. It will be much easier on our younger girls now than it was for their predecessors. They can thank these great-great-great-grandmothers before them who actually broke through the glass ceiling and tore down the concrete wall. Women lawyers have made so many contributions. Lawyers make contributions to our society. It's very important to appreciate how they can help individuals gain a sense of security to pursue their life goals, knowing someone will have their back if they need it. In reality, lawyers perform a critical role in the promotion of social order because they administer the law in a manner which answers the fundamental requirements of justice, namely fair outcomes arrived by fair procedures. Now, for the most part, attorneys who practice law with ethics and integrity really do contribute to the well-being of society by promoting justice through fair procedures. They are the advocates and advisors for our society. They work to represent individuals and corporations in civil trials. They promote justice in criminal trials. They work as advisors to their clients, informing them of their rights, educating them about the processes of law, and really do help navigate a very often tricky legal system. Without lawyers, individuals like you and me, non-lawyers, would have to research the law and previous judicial decisions to understand how those decisions and laws might apply in our circumstances. It's the attorneys who dedicate their lives to understanding the law, and they help apply the law in their clients' cases with the best interests of their clients in mind. Lawyers also work to hold corporations, organizations, even the government, accountable. When a big corporation attempts to take advantage of an individual or a small party of individuals, it's the attorneys who can work to protect the rights of the individual in the group and keep the bigger party from strong-arming a smaller party. So whether you like them or don't, attorneys, barristers, advocates are a necessary profession in the global society. All that to introduce you to my wonderful guest today that you're going to be hearing from. Stay tuned. Today, Womanocity is so happy to welcome Marianne Geula. She comes to us from Chicago, Illinois. She is so remarkable. Of course, all my guests are remarkable, but Marianne's really special. We've spent New Year's together. We have laughed. We have enjoyed the company of one another for so long. I'm so proud to know her. She is an author in the book Transformative Change, Spiritual Journey in the Americas. She's a human rights advocate. She's a former chief of staff and an attorney general fellow. She's also an attorney for probate, tax, trust, and estate planning. But today, we're talking about mothers. Yep, a lot of you are mothers. I'm a mother. She's a mother. We are talking about mothers and what it means to be one, to have children, to raise them, the challenges, the joys, the rewards, all the things that are associated with mothers. So let's get started. Welcome, Marianne Geula.
Thank you, Tadia. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here and speaking with you. Thank you to your audience also for tuning in. This is great. I'm glad to have this opportunity.
Well, we are too. And we're talking about mothers, among the many, many things. There's a quote by an unknown author that says, "Being a mother means that your heart is no longer yours. It wanders wherever your children do." Oh, well, I attest to that. How about you, Marianne?
Oh, always, always. I think one of the things about being a mother is that it's a forever occupation. It's a forever connection. That no matter where your children are, near or far, in this world or the next, you always feel a closeness to them.
You have 2 daughters. What is the greatest lesson you've learned about raising girl children?
One of the things that I learned about raising girl children is the importance of educating them and educating them to be confident in themselves so that they are aware of their own capacities, that they're aware of their own intelligence. As important as it is to be in relationships with good relationships with both your friends and your family, it's also important to be in a good relationship with yourself as a woman so that you are not relying on the world around you or even the people around you in some ways to constantly reaffirm your worth and your sense of self. Teaching them to have a sense of confidence, a sense of trust in their own capacities and in their abilities to problem solve, rely on their intelligence, as well as also to be tender-hearted.
Where did you learn all this?
I learned all this from my mother. Her name was Eva Fisher Smith, and she was someone who was raised in a farm in Western Massachusetts at the beginning of the 1900s. She was one of 7 children, and they lived in a very remote area. Well, she left the farm and eventually had a lot of life experiences and ended up in the state of Michigan.
Now, your mother was from a Dutch, Welsh, German ancestry. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And your father was African American.
That's correct. He was African American. He was born in Alabama, and he was also raised on a farm. He and his family came to Michigan, to the Detroit area during the Great Migration in the United States. And his father sorted scrap metal and brewed moonshine in Michigan.
Brewed moonshine. You're talking about whiskey?
Absolutely. Absolutely. He had at that time it was prohibition in the United States, and he had a little still in his house in Hamtramck, Michigan. So he worked in the Ford factory and also brewed moonshine.
Isn't that interesting? Oh my gosh.
Well, let me tell you how my father met my mother. My mother became a member of the Baha'i community. My father eventually became a Baha'i, and both my mother and father were one of the first interracial couples in Michigan. At the time, it was legal to have an interracial marriage in Michigan, but in many states of the United States, it was not legal. And in many places in Michigan, there had what they call de facto sundown rules. So people of African ancestry, if you were caught in the town after sundown, you might be subject to vigilante violence.
Fortunately, your parents were legally married, but there must have been challenges for you being raised as this biracial, I hate that term, but biracial child. What did you get? What was the messages that you learned?
There were an assortment of messages. This is the late 50s and early 1960s, the 1960s and 70s, and really coming of age of the civil rights movement in the United States. And the messages that we got were that it was very, very important as people of African ancestry they always used to say you have to be twice as good just to get in the door, just to have the opportunity, just to have the chance. And my mother was basically accepted into the Black community, and we lived in Black areas. I say Black areas and areas of African American ancestry. And what became important to us was to be sure to demonstrate our humanity at all times, because this was something that people whose hearts were filled with prejudice, either those of European ancestry or those of African ancestry, it was important to show courtesy. It was important to show love. It was important to show courage. It was important to be human, be kind, be forgiving, be brave, be as much reflective of the God-given qualities that exist in the human spirit and to show those at all times and under all conditions. We didn't always ring the bell. In fact, we didn't ring the bell most of the time growing up. But those were the things to strive for.
You know, the kind of power that mothers possess is enormous. And her courage to be different, white in a society that I'm sure frowned on her, called her names, and threw insults at her for marrying a Black man, the power she had was just enormous. It's this kind of power that mothers have that helps to raise their children, whether they're girls or boys, whether they work outside of the home or inside of the home. Society has a tremendous stake in insisting that women have equality for opportunity, equality to achieve, because the alternatives are just too expensive.
Exactly. And as you were saying, one of the things that I found very motivating about my mother was that she was raising African American ancestry children who did not look like her, children whose hair was not like hers, children whose skin was not like hers, and raising us to find the beauty in ourselves and not to be in imitation of other models of beauty and standards of beauty that were part of the majority culture. Also, my mother went back to college when she was much later in her life. And I think that's something that inspired me, because when I was raising my girls, I was home for quite a bit of the time. And then later on, I went to work, and then I went back to school and studied law well into my older years. I remember one of my children's elementary school teachers said, "My, I hear you're going back to school. Aren't you kind of old for that?" And I laughed and I thought, yes, I'm still going back to school. I was inspired by my mother to consider that education doesn't necessarily have to have a deadline. And lifelong learning is something that anyone can aspire to.
Absolutely. It's so true. Never stop learning, whether you attend a formal school or informal school, however you learn, just keep learning. Again, Womanocity for women with curiosity. Curiosity will lead to all kinds of opportunities. And as soon as we come back, I want to know, Marianne Geula, what was the most interesting legal case you entered into? We'll be right back. Don't go away on Woman Radio.
learn to live, when we learn to give each other what we need to survive, together alive, ebony and ivory live together in perfect harmony, side by side on my piano keyboard. Oh Lord, why don't we side by side on my piano keyboard? Oh Lord, why don't we? Ebony, ivory, living in perfect harmony. Ebony, ivory, living in perfect harmony. Ebony, ivory, living in perfect harmony. Ebony, ivory, living in perfect harmony.
Welcome back, folks. We're with Marianne Geula in Chicago, Illinois, and she's going to tell us about her most interesting legal case.
The case involved a young African-American man. He was in high school, and he had been threatened by another young man. And so he ended up carrying a gun, which in the United States is legal to carry a gun if you're licensed to carry a gun. But he was not licensed. The young man was struggling with another police officer. The gun went off during the struggle, and a park ranger, a state park ranger who was standing at a distance, was shot by that stray bullet and subsequently died. The young man, although he had no prior criminal record, received a very, very harsh sentence from the judge. He was sentenced to many years in jail based on the number of bullets, received 3 to 5 years for every bullet that he had. He received a very, very harsh sentence because additional years because it was a gun. On top of that, this case was a manslaughter, murder nonetheless. So the young man, again, who had no criminal record, no priors, no history of trouble whatsoever, received many, many years, what I would probably consider most of his life, a prison sentence. One of the reasons that sticks in my mind is innocent lives that were destroyed just from an idle teenage threat, one teenager threatening another in what could have been a very casual exchange. And it also struck me the injustice of the harshness of making an example of a young man who was not trying to kill anyone, but felt that it was necessary to defend himself. The whole situation was one of great loss and great suffering. It touched my heart and made me value both human life and the importance of relationships, being mindful of the relationships that we have in each other, with each other.
Wow, that is quite a moving story. As a young lawyer, that had to have had great impact on you. And I know, you've been such a social activist. You've spoken about human rights, LGBTQ rights, women's rights. I mean, you really are an authority and an expert on women's rights, not just in America, but around the world. One issue that you have discussed that has fascinated me, and I have seen it firsthand, is women's inheritance issues. Tell us a little bit more about what you've learned.
Something that I've learned in the United States is that from their property that they may have brought to a marriage, marital property. And in most of the United States now, those laws have changed. that women, in fact, in community property states, women are allowed to keep the property that they brought into a marriage, that it's not necessarily divided under spousal divisions. But in some places, it's very, very important in preparing a will that husbands and wives communicate well with each other and make sure that the property that they own or have, that they don't necessarily assume that it will go to a surviving spouse. Particularly for women, if a husband dies and he has property only in his name, she may not get it. He has the right to distribute that property to children who may not be from that marriage. He has the right to distribute property to other people. He may owe debts to business associates. And so women should not presume that sort of what's yours is mine and what's mine is yours, because that doesn't necessarily hold true. Have a calm conversation, what may be a difficult conversation, but have a conversation with a spouse, with their husband, with a spouse, so that they know what material wealth, what property is in the marriage, is part of the relationship, is part of the marriage. There was just a recent case in China where a husband and wife were divorcing, and the husband was made to pay back wages to the wife for childcare, housework.
Her husband didn't die, so it wasn't about inheriting. She was divorcing him, and she was able to get a settlement. Is that correct?
She was able to get a settlement based on the intangibles of housework, childcare, and those don't have a property value. And so it was interesting for a court to determine that, to set a figure of any kind. Now, granted, it was probably something that's very low, and people are saying, that this is something that is barely the minimum wage of anything beyond agricultural work in China. But the concept that someone was being in China paid for work in a marriage that was recognized by a court is a new step.
So laws are very important. So women of Womanocity, you have to make sure you take care of your legal rights and responsibilities within your marriage or your common law living situation, because whether it's divorce or death, you don't want to lose everything you've invested in over the years of your union. Talk about widow cleansing, because it's something that a lot of people don't know about, Marianne.
There are many versions of widow cleansing, and basically the short piece of this is that after a married woman's husband passes away, in some cultures and traditions, the widow is seen as having no rights whatsoever, and also may be seen as being sexually unclean. And so it may be interpreted by family members that she needs to have sex with a male member of her husband's family or even a stranger. But it also essentially means that she has no rights.
Wait a minute.
She has no rights to...
Let's go back to the having sex piece. Where is the logic in that? I don't get it.
The logic there really isn't much logic. It's a function of perhaps cultural beliefs and the idea that her sex partner has died, and therefore she in some way may have had something to do with that death. Maybe there are bad energies associated with her. And so that energy is the only word I can use for it. But that those have to be cleansed, if you will, by another male member of the husband's family, or if there are no male members, possibly a stranger or an acquaintance of the husband.
That just sounds like sexual exploitation to me by superstitious beliefs that have no foundation in reality.
Again, these are things that women are working to change. They're working to change these throughout the world. They're working to change these in places where they exist. And as you say, it can be very shocking, but these are also been cultural practices. And it is important for women to know not every element of one's culture is necessarily beneficial or positive, and that we have to be willing to take a look at practices that may have been passed on to us from generations that are no longer serving our needs.
Oh my goodness, that is stunning. I had not known about it. I did know about in India when a man wants to get rid of a wife, he can do a kitchen fire and burn her up, and therefore he gets his freedom because now he's free to marry somebody else. And of course, there's honor killings. Women are just so exploited, whether it's genital mutilation. It goes on. And it's 2021, and we're still talking about the rape and exploitation of women and abuse. Here we still are talking about these as problems.
Yeah, in 2021, we have to be very mindful that the role of women has evolved and changed along with, the technology around us, along with our material world. Why would women not be thought of as equal and full partners to men? We look around us and there are many, many things that have changed. There are many, many things that have evolved. Nothing stays the same. The reality of our societies not necessarily having to rely on physical strength, the reality of women not being bound by the same type of physical constraints that may have faced women generations ago, that we have the intellectual capacity, we have the spiritual capacity, we have the capacity to stand shoulder to shoulder, hand in hand with men in almost every strata of social growth and development. And this is not to say that men and women are exactly the same. It's a God-given truth that we're not. And with that, there are enough ways that men and women can celebrate each other and cherish each other for the gifts that we bring to the societies that we live in, to the world that we live in.
How do we convince men that we are two wings of a bird? How do we raise our sons to honor women?
One of the things about being a mother is that when we are also the mothers to boy children, and the fact that we have the ability to raise the next generation of young men. Yes, there is definitely a role for fathers. Of course, there's a role for fathers. One of the things that's important, though, is that mothers are the first educators of their children. One of the things that I have learned as a member of the Baha'i community is that the equality of women and men is very important, and that men's potentialities are also tied in to the advancement of women. In fact, there is a quote in the Baha'i writings from Abdu'l-Baha, and he writes that women have equal rights with men upon earth. In religion and society, women are a very important element. As long as women are prevented from attaining their highest possibilities, so long will men be unable to achieve the greatness which might be theirs.
Wow. The greatness which might be theirs. So men, and men do listen to this show, you have a greatness that should be yours, just as women do. But you have to play a role, whether you're a brother, a son, an uncle, a boy cousin. The burden really is on the shoulders of men to protect women, to protect their daughters, their sisters, their mothers, their grandmothers, their aunties. And because sexual exploitation, rape, And abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse of women is so rampant. I'm always calling on men to play their part. How can women help men learn this? How can women encourage their boys, their husbands, their fathers, their uncles to change this?
By paying attention, by watching carefully, listening carefully, listening with love and connection, listening with interest. We are connected one to another in ways that we can hardly imagine. And it's being aware of those connections. What happens to one of us, what happens to women, is not only the province of women themselves. What happens to men is connected to what happens to women. We are connected to what happens to each other. And if we're paying attention to the relationships that we have, the things that we say to each other, the things that we do with, to, and for each other, resonate with all of us.
Words of wisdom, my dear, words of wisdom. If you are willing to share about your marriage, because you did something that very few women do. You married outside of all of your cultures, all of your ethnicities, all of what you knew and were raised with. And that's a fascinating story. Marianne Smith Geula, will you tell us that story as soon as we come back?
Sure.
So let's listen to Aretha. We'll be right back. Don't go away on Woman Radio. Marianne Smith Geula in Chicago, Illinois. Lawyer, mother, human rights activist, women's rights advocate. Oh, my dear, you have a story that's pretty incredible. Your marriage. I have met your husband. He's a remarkable medical doctor, a man of great accomplishments. He's wonderful, kind, he's funny, he's delightful, he's a great father, and he's not African American. Matter of fact, he wasn't even born American. Matter of fact, he's from so far away that I didn't even know about his culture or his nation for decades until I learned about it in the 1970s, almost 80s. Tell us about your wonderful husband, Dr. Changiz Geula. How did you meet? Why did you fall in love with him? What happened?
I met him in Michigan. And actually, the first time I met him was in passing at a meeting. Friends had told me, oh, this Chinese Geula, he's a wonderful, wonderful guy. You'll just love him. You'll just meet him. And the first time I met him, I was not impressed because he was really preoccupied with some other things and, of course, did not pay any attention to me. And so I thought, well, so what? What's this big deal? Because I, had a very high opinion of myself at that time. Didn't leave room for being ignored. So
that's quite all right. I think we all need that.
But I met him and got to know him later on. I met him more formally or informally, as the case may be, and got to know him later on when I was working at Blue Helen High School. I was working as a summer program director, and he was a member of the board of directors, the council. And actually, we got to know each other well. A group had come up to have a weekend program, and they had not been entered into the schedule. So we did not know that they were coming. So a group of about 6 or 7 people came and said, we're here for our training program. And we said, oh, okay, well, please make yourselves comfortable. We'll have something for you this evening, a welcoming session, and then we'll begin the program tomorrow. And we didn't have anything prepared because we didn't know they were coming. So Changiz, myself, and the director of the school got together, and for about the next 6 or 7 hours, well into the night, we developed a program for the folks. Had it ready to go first thing in the morning. But that was the occasion that I got to know my husband much better. One of the cute stories that we have is he was doing research at the time as a PhD student and invited me to come and see his rats. Because his rats, R-A-T-S, rats, his rats, because he was doing laboratory work, research on animal behavior and brain research on the animals. They were very humanely treated. They were well fed. But I thought that was one of the strangest invitations that I had ever received before or since. Was I'd like you to come and see my rats.
Yeah, that's kind of an unusual pickup line, Oh my gosh. So how long had he been in America?
He had been in the United States probably for about 10 years at that time. He came when he was a teenager. He came out of high school. His brother, some of his family members were already here, but he came with another of his brothers, and they studied English. They moved to where another brother was, then went to school. So he came as a teenager. He'd been in the country for probably about 10 years or so.
Had you ever met anyone from Iran before?
Actually, I had, because my parents were members of the Baha'i community, and there were other Iranians who were members of the Baha'i community, but it was mostly because we lived in Lansing, Michigan, which was near East Lansing, Michigan, which was near Michigan, where Michigan State University was. And there were foreign students and foreign researchers, some who were members of the Baha'i community, and we got a chance to meet people from there. So I had met people from Iran before.
And what do you think?
I didn't think anything necessarily, just because I was used to seeing people from other places and other countries. The thought that I would marry someone from another place or another country was not necessarily on my radar. It was not necessarily something I was thinking of. My parents were from a Christian background. My husband is from a Jewish background. His family members became Baha'is, but were from a Jewish background in Iran. And so as Iranian Jews, they were a minority. and not only persecuted for being Jews, but then later on persecuted for being Baha'is.
The Baha'is are still persecuted in Iran, and we never know when that's going to change. Until the government changes from fundamentalist Islam, the Baha'is will continue to suffer in any country that adopts that state religion. Now, it's so interesting. So you got married, and what are some of the takeaways from intercultural, interracial, internationality? I don't even know how to describe your union. It's got every element of the unexpected conditions for a solid, long marriage.
And that's perhaps, those are some of the exact reasons why we have had a solid, long marriage, is because we make no assumptions. We know we have to actively ask questions. We don't take things for granted. Oh, well, he'll like this kind of food, or we did it, I'll tell you, we did in the beginning of our marriage. One of the customs that is very common among Iranians and people in the Middle East and Mediterranean area is actually something called tarof. And it's the concept of you have to really insist and have because this is a test of sincerity. If I'm going to offer you dinner, I'm going to have to offer you dinner about 3 times, because you're obliged to say, oh, no, thank you. No, I don't want any, because they really want to see, are you sincere, or is this are we just, you're just saying this? And so when we first got married, we lived in Detroit, and my husband had some other Persian young men who were friends. We had a lot of people of African ancestry, Middle Eastern ancestry who would come. And I would say to them, oh, would you like something to drink? Would you like something to eat? Are you comfortable? Are you fine? Do you need anything? Can I get you something? And they would say, oh, no. And I would go sit down. That was it. And my husband is over there doing, the palm to the forehead, saying, no, wait a minute, and would, proceed to get up and serve them, ask them again and again. And then afterward, I'm like, well, didn't they say they didn't want anything? What's this? They said no. Isn't that good enough? But it was like, no, you have to ask them multiple times, not just once, not just twice. You really have to insist. And I remember having a conversation with my husband's mother when she was alive. I asked her about this, and she says, yes, it's because you have to make sure that you're sincere in your offer. This is an exercise in sincerity. Because if you're just saying this, and somebody's going to say no, and you're going to go sit down. But people really want to know that you're sincere and that you mean what you say.
That's so interesting. There are aspects of Persian culture, various African cultures, Asian cultures, Hawaiian culture that have really some benefits and lessons for Westerners who would simply say, oh, would you like something to eat? Yeah, sure. And it's like, wait a minute, I don't know how to respond to that. Oh my gosh. What a wonderful love story and an inspiration for everyone. We just never know who we'll meet in our lives. Your marriage is a good lesson for people. Let's take a quick break and listen to Roberta Flack, who will sing a song that's a favorite of all of ours. Don't go away, because when we come back, we're going to talk to Marianne Geula about the years she lived in China. We will learn so much. You don't want to miss this. Stay tuned. We'll be right back on Womanocity for women with curiosity like you.
Hi everyone, it's your girl Lindy K, and I'm just asking you to join me every Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock for the interview. Let's get inspired. Only on Women Radio.
first time ever I saw your face, I thought the sun rose in your eyes, and the moon and the stars were the gifts you gave to the dark and the endless skies, my love, to the dark and the endless skies. And the first time ever I kissed your mouth, I felt the earth move in my hand, like the trembling heart of a captive bird that was there at my command, my love, that was there at my command, my love. And the first time ever I lay with you, I felt your heart so close to mine, and I knew our joy would fill the earth and last till the end of time, my love, and it would last till the end of time, my love. The first time ever I saw your face, your face, your face, your face.
We are back on Womanocity with Marianne Geula. Her story is quite amazing. You're married to an Iranian who came from a Jewish background. Your parents came from a Christian background, and you are a Baha'i, yet you decided to go to China where religion is outlawed. Why and for how long did you do that?
Well, in China, religion is not outlawed in the same way we might think of it. People are free to choose a belief. The Chinese people are free to choose a belief. It's just the government frowns upon people who are proselytizing and who are trying openly to convert. There are certain religious beliefs and practices that are approved by the government. The government knows and is very clear about what practices it approves of and which ones it doesn't. And as far as the Baha'i faith is concerned, as I went as an individual and as a member of the Baha'i community, I'm free to practice my beliefs. I'm free to express my beliefs and share my beliefs with others, and to also hear and be in touch with any other people who are interested in such beliefs, such as the oneness of mankind, such as obedience to government, such as virtues such as truthfulness, honesty, courtesy, and the encouragement and development of those types of beliefs. I went to China, was very moved because in the Baha'i tradition, the principle of the oneness of humanity, it's a reality that we don't always see expressed in the material world, but it's a reality. And I felt very drawn to see how that reality is expressed in a country where there's a deep cultural tradition of belief. There's a deep cultural tradition of spirituality, if you will. If you look at the structure of a pagoda, which is a very distinctly Chinese and Asian structure, a pagoda is something that is long and tall and reaches towards the heaven. And it is something where scholars would go to study. And the idea of as you progress as a scholar, you go to study at the higher levels, you are in essence being closer to heaven. So there are physical structures that represent the cultural ideas of spirituality that permeate Chinese culture. It's very, very profound traditions of what is a creative force. The Western word is God, but the phrase from the traditional Chinese belief of the Tao is that which is the Tao cannot be named, and if it can be named, it is not the Tao. There are very, very profound is the word, I've already used it, but I'll use it again, profound traditions of connectedness to all things in the universe.
And how is that expressed? Because what we hear and see is such a repression of people's spirits. And you're telling me things that are not reflecting that.
No, the government understands that religion is a force in people's lives. People understand that they are free to choose a belief or a tradition. So my going there was really in response to this desire to see human oneness expressed and a desire to learn as much as I could about a country that is very spiritually infused traditions of Taoism, traditions of Buddhism, traditions of Confucian teachings, all of which emphasize virtue, all of which emphasize relationships, whether it's in Confucianism, the relationships between oneself, one's family, one's government, one's leaders. Taoism, the relationship between oneself and creation. Buddhism, the relationship between one's self, others, life of the spirit. So these are very, very powerfully infused into the fabric of society. They don't necessarily go by nominal religious beliefs, if you will, but they are very much in the ether of everyday life.
Mothers in China raise their children with these spiritual concepts. The schools promote and encourage these spiritual principles within the school, and yet it's so misunderstood. Thank you so much for explaining that. I've learned a lot from you. China was such an illuminating experience for you. How did they respond to you? It's so different. Here you are, an African American in China, beautiful woman, foreigner. How was the response to you?
The response to me initially was as a foreigner. And the place where I lived in China was more in the interior, the northern interior of the country, and not so much the cities of Beijing, Shanghai, and so forth, where you have many people, many foreigners, and there's a lot of familiarity with foreign people, not just foreign countries, but foreign people as well. And in the city where I was, there were not only not that many foreigners, but not that many foreigners of African ancestry. And so one of the most interesting experiences that I had while I was there was trying to get a haircut, trying to get my hair done. Because the first thing that Chinese barbers will do is to spray your hair with water. And so when they would, I would just come in and take off my hat because it was in the north and it's always cold. It's always cold in the north. You come in, you take off your hat, you sit down and would say, duan, short. I would say duan, short, cut, just short. And so they kind of look at my head, look at my hair, and start spraying water on it because it's very curly, right? It's very tightly kinked, and they would spray water on it, and I would almost jump out of the chair because they're thinking that they're going to spray water on it and it will straighten out and be flat. And the absolute opposite happens as anyone who has hair from the African tradition knows, water is not going to make your hair straighten out. So that was always an interesting experience. And they would never, and when anyone would start to cut it, other people in the shop would look, and they would just sort of look because your hair is fluffy, when it's cut, and it stays fluffy when it's cut. And so they would just look and, chat with each other and point to my hair and point to the floor and point. And it was probably as amusing to me as it was to them. I'm sure people would have wanted, if they could have sold tickets, they would have.
Oh my God.
To see this foreigner with really foreign hair come get a haircut.
That's hilarious. Hey, did they have M&Ms in China?
They did. You can get M&Ms in China. Yeah, that's funny. It's in the Western stores.
I love M&Ms. I have stories about M&Ms, but mostly I like to ask my guests, what's your favorite color or flavor is?
Oh, M&M's peanut. M&M's peanut. In fact, when I knew I was going back, I went and I think I bought a 3-pound bag and put it in my suitcase and just wrapped it up tightly so that, it would be visible on X-ray as something, not suspicious, but not such that it would, you want it to get through customs. Okay, you want to have it when you come out the other side.
And they didn't take it away from you, huh? They didn't take M&Ms?
No, they didn't take my M&Ms. They let me keep my M&Ms.
Oh, how wonderful. So I bet if I asked you if you were willing to give up chocolate or your favorite TV, which one would you choose?
Oh, TV's out the door. TV's out the door. Dark chocolate. Dark chocolate. Dark or don't bother. Dark chocolate.
Oh my goodness. If you had nothing scheduled for an entire day, which I know never happens to you, but if it did, What would you do with your time?
Oh, with my time, I would read and I would listen. I would listen to music. I would listen to talks. I would read. And then I would go for a walk. I would go for a walk. I would go for a walk near water. I would want to see grass and trees and sky. If I lived in the mountains, I would want to go walking in the mountains so that you can look over. I love open vistas because places where you have a long horizon allows a certain kind of thinking, no obstacles, just the horizon. And the horizon plus altitude, mountain overlooking water. I love islands for that, volcanic and mountainous islands for those aspects of altitude and horizon.
Did you go to islands when you were in China?
I didn't. No, I didn't. I did climb. I did do walking, hiking. I won't say mountain climbing. I walked the Great Wall. And from the Great Wall most places along the wall, you have a beautiful, beautiful view of the landscape. And you see the wall stretching out over mountains and wonder how they did it. But also there are other areas of mountains in China. Northern China is very mountainous, and you have mountains on mountains on mountains behind mountains. So it's a very, very beautiful landscape.
Wow. I've never been to China. It's so wonderful to be able to see it through your explanations and your eyes. And no matter where we are, a mother is a mother, and mothers there were just probably the same as mothers here. They discipline their children. They hug their children. Their heart is always with their children. We just don't get to see enough of it to get the connection to understand it.
Yeah, and especially during the years of the one-child policy, you would see this devotion, this utter devotion, not only by mothers, but also by fathers. Because when they are very present to the fact that this is their one child, there's just this love and the capacity of parents to show tenderness and love to their children. It was just something that, because they know that this is their one child and this is it. I was so moved by that. I thought it was just delightful. And one of the things also that you got to see was many generations of people and many ways that people, in a park on a Sunday afternoon, families having fun, flying kites, adults flying kites with children, adults jumping rope, having jump rope with children, and adults having jump rope with adults. Just wonderful ways of just enjoying each other's company and having fun.
Oh my goodness. It's one day maybe I'll get there. I don't know, but you're always invited to come to Hawaii, and you can have an island here and you can enjoy it very, very much. I just want to get back to our talk about mothers. There's a very interesting point of history that I want our audience to know, and it's about Sojourner Truth. And I say this in tribute to your African-American history and your genetics and the background from which your father came, in which slavery was a part of it. But Sojourner Truth, probably one of the most well-known people ever enslaved in America, who escaped slavery and went on to save others from this inhumane, heinous American tradition. In 1826, Sojourner Truth heard that her 5-year-old son, Peter, had been sold to a man in Alabama illegally. What did Sojourner Truth do? She raised money for a lawyer. She filed a complaint in New York's court, It was a landmark case, and you'll appreciate this as an attorney. It was a landmark case in which a Black woman successfully sued a white man in court, and she got her son. She won her case. Did you know that?
I did. And it's important also to know that Sojourner Truth was enslaved on Dutch-speaking property, so that her language in this country was Dutch. So you can imagine that this is someone who is not only going through the horrors of enslavement, but in the subsequent years of her life, mastering English as a foreign, as an additional language for her. That's very powerful.
Yes, she spoke only Dutch for the first 6 years of her life. And I have been absolutely fascinated by her history, which has been so distorted in so many ways. I want to tell our listeners that not only did Sojourner Truth speak Dutch because of her slave master, but the very famous speech that most people know as "Ain't I a Woman" was changed. The original speech that she had given was not called that at all, and it was not given in slave jargon. It was changed by a newspaper person called Frances Dana Barker Gage, but it had originally been written down by Reverend Marius Robinson in the publication The Anti-Slavery Bugle, and it was actually called On Women's Rights. So what I want listeners to do is go to the Facebook page of the Sojourner Truth Project. There you can compare the speeches of how it was changed and has become the distorted view of Sojourner Truth. You can actually hear the readings in Dutch, the way she actually spoke, not by her, but by Dutch actresses who have recorded it in various dialects. It's amazing. So Sojourner Truth on women's rights, know it. It's really important. Thank you. I'm so glad you knew about this too. Very few people do. Okay, enough for that. We're going to take a break. Do not go away. We'll be right back with Marianne Geula on Womanocity. Thank you for listening.
What does it mean to be a human being? What is truth? And does this even matter? Join me, Gabaza Deba, on Woman Radio every Thursday between 6 and 7 p.m. as I interview complex and multifaceted guests on what their worldview is and how they answer questions around origin, identity, meaning, morality, and destiny. My intention is just to get you thinking. Why? Well, it depends. It depends on whether the truth matters. Here on Woman Radio, for we are.
This is Tadia Rice on Woman Radio. I hope you're listening to my new show, Womanocity for Women with Curiosity, airing every Sunday night, 6 to 8 p.m. South Africa time. Let me know if you have comments, suggestions, or questions. Send an email to info@womanr.co.za, WOMANR.co.za. In the subject line, put my name, Tadia, or Womanocity. Thank you for listening to Womanocity on Woman Radio.
Hi, I am Dr. Sia. Please catch me every Monday at 7 o'clock in the evening on Woman Radio, where I will be talking about breaking free from trauma, from everything that is holding you back from becoming the best version of yourself. Woman Radio, well-organized man, for we are.
And we're back with Marianne Geula, speaking to me from Chicago, Illinois, speaking to me in Honolulu, Hawaii. All the way, I don't know, what are we, 2,000 miles apart?
I'm noticing that before I came to the interview, I had to take off several layers. I was wearing layers. And I'm noticing that you who are in Hawaii are sipping something that looks very cool. And I'm sitting here with my flask full of warm water.
I'm so sorry. I suppose it's snowing heavily in Chicago right now.
It has been snowing heavily. Actually, it is actually warmed up. It's probably about 8 degrees centigrade.
Oh, that is awful. And here it is, warm and beautiful.
I know.
Blue skies, fluffy white clouds. The trade winds are blowing. And it is your actual, anything you imagine about Hawaii being beautiful with palm trees and blue waters. Yeah, it's true. I can't deny it. People will say to me, oh, you're so lucky you live in Hawaii. And I have to respond and tell them, luck had nothing to do with this. I purposely moved here after 15 years in South Africa. At the beginning, I was there in 1994 for the Madiba days and for South Africa's first 2 decades almost of freedom and democracy. As I was aging, I decided I wanted to be closer to my children. So I made a compromise and came to Hawaii. So it's part of the United States legally, but it's not really. It doesn't feel it. It has its own culture, and I have to live where there is a culture that I can love, which is more, which certainly leans indigenous as opposed to Western.
Well, these are wonderful things to hear. It's wonderful. It's wonderful to know that some part of the United States sort of is trying to allow the indigenous culture to flourish. I think this is part of the growth of us as a humanity, to be able to enjoy, and rather than to see something as strange and exotic and nice place to visit, but who wants to live there? Yes, we want to live there.
We are the only island state of the U.S. We are the only state that has a royal palace, because before the United States stole the Hawaiian Islands, which is a whole nother show, it had a monarchy, a sovereign monarchy. I hope that one day, while I'm still alive, we will get to be the Hawaiian nation again, because I certainly would become a citizen in a heartbeat. So, hey, now that we've talked, I'm just going to shift a little bit. I know you love M&Ms. I do too, but my color is yellow and not peanut. But you enjoy your peanut ones. I'll enjoy my yellow ones because I really think they taste different than the others. Very interesting. Everybody believes their own color tastes different from the others. So I want to know, are you a dog or cat person?
Oh, I'm a fish. Come on, what's this dog or cat? I want fish. I love to look at fish. I don't need to have a dog or cat to sit on my lap. I want to look at the motion and the movement of fish fins. I think that's fascinating.
Oh, you've got to come to Hawaii. You can snorkel here and see all the fish you've never wanted to see before, including sharks. Oh, my goodness. That's really funny. Almost everybody is a dog or cat person. Shoosh. Interesting. Well, if you were stuck on a deserted island, what 3 things would you bring?
Oh, what I would bring. I would bring a telescope to be able to see the stars. I would bring fire just to be able to be warm, create. And
your 3rd thing?
My 3rd thing, oh my goodness. I would bring a grateful heart. I would make sure that I had a heart full of gratitude for being on that desert island and hoping that it would sustain me.
Oh, isn't that the truth? Oh my gosh. to be alone in this world is not a good thing. And with COVID, more and more people are feeling alone, including myself, because everything's in lockdown. You can't go out freely. We're living off of Zoom. Oh, and yeah. So got to stick together, people. Don't leave others alone. Reach out. Yeah. We can't reach out and touch, but we can reach out and see and talk.
We can reach out and see and be grateful for the technology of Zoom, or the visual media. I mean, this is the stuff. I'm of the age of this is the stuff our cartoons were made of. That we could talk and see each other, that we could talk and hear each other, that this was visual. This was the stuff of science fiction. And now we get to live it.
Isn't it something? I remember my grandmother, who was 63 years old when she went to Senegal, Dakar, to see her brother. And it was the first time, of course, she'd ever been on a plane. And she was old. It even got in the newspaper that this old lady was going to get on a plane to travel so far from the United States to the African continent. And I think of her and I think, what would she have thought about all this? Because knowing her, she'd have been on here. She'd have jumped on email, likely been on TikTok for all I know.
And then some. Yes, the pandemic separates us, but yes, it sure brings us close together in ways that we just never dreamed of, never could have dreamed of. The fact that you can be in Hawaii in the warm sunshine and I'm here in Chicago in the cold.
So
I know. But nevertheless, we can have these wonderful conversations about women who are amazing and dazzling and the women who are yet to come, who will bring sciences and arts that will make our heads spin and our hearts rejoice. I am all for it. I am all for the future. I want to ask you, Tadia, tell me, if you were something in the back of your refrigerator, what would you be?
I don't believe you asked me that. Okay, I'm going to copy that for next time. The next guest is going to be that one. If I was in the back of the refrigerator, now am I still fresh? Can I find that out? Have I molded?
You can be anything this is anything. You in the back of the refrigerator.
A box of strawberries.
Ooh, why?
I have no idea. It's just all about strawberries and how sweet. I guess I'm craving strawberries. And they're not in season. Well, they might be. I could get them here, but they're not in season most of North America.
That's one of the things that lawyers get to do sometimes is ask off-the-wall questions, because usually there's a very particular pattern and trajectory that we're following, and we want to have our witnesses tell a particular story.
Okay.
Sometimes we just throw random questions out there because it throws everybody off base.
It should throw another one, because never has a guest asked me questions.
Oh, well, you see, this is, again, part of the process. Sometimes because we want to draw you out, especially in estate planning. We want to, have you get your feelings out about what is it that you own? How do you own it? And what do you want to have happen to it? So if you were something you could bequeath, you could gift to someone else, what would it be?
Oh, my. Either an object of art or a piece of clothing.
And what would you want them to think of when they saw or wore you or touched you?
Me, of course.
What about you?
I would want them to remember me, remember the good things about our relationship, the moments where we would laugh, the moments where, whatever moment that they recall that meant something to them. Mm-hmm. Ooh, you're getting awfully personal, Marianne.
Well, you see, this is something also women can talk to each other in this way. Is much easier. Men can too, and they do. But for women, it's one of the nice things about being women And one of the graces that the culture tends to give us, is that we can connect like this. And this is some of the ways that I'm hoping that this program that you have is allowing women to connect with each other across time and space and generations.
Very true. And that's what this show is about. Womanocity for women of curiosity. When I designed this, when I thought it up, when this time slot was offered to me, I thought, well, what do I want to talk about? What is it about me that drives me? Well, curiosity. So I thought, okay, curiosity. And then it came to me, womanocity. Okay, it's on Woman Radio. We're all about women, for women, with women. The station is all women. And as much as I love men, this is about women. So it's very interesting that you asked me these questions. So I guess in bringing our time to a close, which I'm sorry to say has to happen because I love being with you, let me just ask you, what is next in your life?
Oh, what is next in my life is to investigate, research, and prepare information on truth and reconciliation commissions in the United States. Right now, I'm doing things as a circle keeper, which is based in restorative justice practices, and that these are ways of looking at what is traditionally thought of as injustices or crimes, and realizing that it's not just between an individual and the state, but it's also between individuals in relationships with each other. This concept of Ubuntu and the notion of we exist in relationship. And truth and reconciliation commissions are something that are being looked at across the United States in various cities and locations to address the harms of the history of enslavement, the history of Jim Crow laws, the history of the prejudice of race that is endemic in the structure of this country. And how do we make reparations? What does that look like? Is it only financial? Is it something that is involving tax? Does it involve property? What is it? What are the terms of it? How do we do this? And I did research in law school on the South African Truth and Reconciliation Commission and published an article about that in Law Review Journal. The time has come again for this question to be raised in the United States. So, because we have been so miseducated, underinformed, we have not been told the truth. We have not known what the truth is. There's been a lot of distortions, deceptions, things that have never come to light are real. And so it's a time of reckoning, and it's a time of uncovering, and it's a time of healing. And in order to go forward and heal and grow in healthy ways as a society, as communities, we need to know facts. We need to know the truth. And we need to hear from people the harms that have been done. We need to give voice to those types of forums. So that's what's on the horizon.
That's a show in itself. So we have to do this again, and that will be the topic. Because as you know, I've worked with women in prison for 10 years and written about it in the same book that you have just written. And I tell you, this is such women. Women have got to have a voice, and you will be giving them a voice through your work with TRC. Hawaii needs a voice with TRC. You're right. Distorted, discouraged, deceptive, deceived. We've been deceived. But we're going to stop that because we have a voice, and you won't ever hear any deception on Womanocity, that's for sure, because we're all about the truth and women. Oh, Marianne, you're amazing. You're amazing, Marianne Smith. Your light is so bright and so strong, no one can ignore it. That's my quote. You can quote me on that.
I certainly will, and with much joy and appreciation. And thank you, Tadia. This has been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you so much for making this space and time available. It's a blessing.
My pleasure, my dear, my pleasure. Thank you for tuning in to Womanocity for women with curiosity, like you. Let me know if you have comments, suggestions, or questions. Send an email to info@womanr.co.za, WOMANR.co.za. In the subject line, put my name, Tadia, or Womanocity. Until next time, this is Tadia Rice.
She gave me life, showed me what was right, taught me not to fight the battles that weren't worth the fight. Right from the start, she held me close.